More than 300 years ago, one city stood between Europe and an empire that seemed unstoppable: Vienna. In the summer of 1683, one of the largest armies the world had ever seen marched toward its walls. If Vienna fell, the road into the heart of Europe would be open, and history might have taken a very different path. This is the story of the siege that changed the fate of a continent. By the late 17th century, the Ottoman Empire was one of the most powerful forces in the world. For centuries, Ottoman armies had expanded across 3 continents. They controlled vast territories in the Middle East, North Africa, and southeastern Europe. Their capital, Constantinople, had fallen to them more than 200 years earlier. Now the empire looked west, and its next objective was clear: Vienna. The city was not just another fortress, it was the gateway to Central Europe. If the Ottomans captured Vienna, the balance of power across the continent could shift dramatically. Leading the Ottoman campaign was Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha. He commanded an army that may have numbered more than 150,000 soldiers, infantry, cavalry, elite janissaries, engineers, and siege specialists. It was one of the most formidable forces assembled in the early modern world. In July 1683, the Ottoman army arrived outside Vienna. The city was surrounded. Inside the walls, fewer than 15,000 defenders prepared for the coming siege. They knew the odds. The defenders included Austrian soldiers, local militias, and a small number of Allied troops. Their commander, Count Ernst Rudiger von Starrenberg, understood that survival depended on one thing: time. If Vienna could hold long enough, reinforcements might arrive. But if the walls fell before help came, the city would be lost. The siege began with relentless intensity. Ottoman artillery pounded the city walls day and night. Engineers dug tunnels beneath the fortifications, placing explosives to weaken the defenses. Each explosion shook the ground beneath Vienna. Buildings collapsed, walls cracked, smoke filled the streets. Food supplies began to run low. Disease spread among the population. Inside the city, soldiers and civilians fought side by side to repair the damage. Every night, they rebuilt shattered barricades. Every morning, new attacks came. The defenders were exhausted, and the Ottomans were closing in. Weeks passed, the city grew weaker, but beyond the walls, something unexpected was happening. Across Europe, a coalition of forces was forming: Holy Roman troops, German princes, and most importantly, the armies of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Leading them was King John III Sobieski of Poland. Sobieski was one of the most experienced military commanders in Europe. He understood what was at stake. If Vienna fell, the Ottoman advance might continue deeper into Europe. So he gathered his forces and marched south. By early September, the Allied army had reached the hills overlooking Vienna. Approximately 70,000 soldiers stood ready to challenge the Ottoman siege. But the Ottoman army was still larger, and they held strong positions around the city. The coming battle would decide everything. On the morning of September 12, 1683, the Allied forces launched their attack. The battle began with intense fighting across the hills surrounding Vienna. Infantry clashed in brutal combat. Cannons thundered across the battlefield. The struggle lasted for hours. Slowly, the Allied forces began pushing the Ottoman lines backward, but the decisive moment had not yet come. Then, late in the afternoon, King Sobieski prepared one of the most famous cavalry charges in history. On the slopes of the Kahlenberg Hill, thousands of armored horsemen gathered. Among them were the legendary Polish winged hussars, elite cavalry known for their speed, discipline, and devastating charges. As the signal was given, more than 18,000 cavalry riders surged down the hillside. It was the largest cavalry charge ever recorded in history. The ground thundered beneath the hooves. The Ottoman lines began to break. Within hours, the Ottoman army collapsed into retreat. After nearly 2 months of siege, Vienna was saved. The victory at Vienna marked a turning point. For the Ottoman Empire, the defeat ended its long expansion into Central Europe. From that moment forward, the empire would slowly lose territory rather than gain it. For Europe, the battle represented something even larger. It showed that the seemingly unstoppable Ottoman advance could be halted. In the decades that followed, new wars pushed the empire further back across the Balkans, and the balance of power across Europe began to shift. Today, the Siege of Vienna is remembered as one of the most decisive battles in European history. A city under siege, an army marching across a continent, and a cavalry charge that changed the course of a war. But like many moments in history, the outcome was never guaranteed. If the defenders had surrendered, if the relief army had arrived too late, or if the final charge had failed, the map of Europe might look different today. Sometimes the fate of entire civilizations can turn on a single battle, and in 1683, that battle was fought outside the walls of Vienna.